Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Winchester Town Forum taking place in the Wharton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 6:30 p.m. My name is Councillor Chris Westwood, chairperson for this meeting. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded to the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to turn this on is set out on our website. Can everyone please ensure mobile phones are on silent? In the unlikely event that it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome members of the public to this meeting, and I will invite you forward when it's time for you to make your contribution. So, turning to the agenda, apologies for absence. I don't believe we have any apologies for absence today.
No, Chair, thank you.
Item 2, disclosures of interest. I think there's a couple of disclosures. Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Chairman. I need to declare that I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of items on the agenda due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there is no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters.
Thank you. Councillor Bather.
Thank you, Chair. Disclosable interest as a employee of Stagecoach, so I'll leave the meeting at the point that item is being held. Thank you.
Item 3, chairperson's announcements. I have no announcements to make this evening. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 12th of June, which was circulated prior to the meeting. Are we agreed that these meeting minutes can be signed as a correct record? Thank you. Item 5, public participation. I have 2 members of the public wishing to speak this evening. Mr. Tate, who would like to speak, I believe now during the public presentation, public participation section, and I also have Edna Bowden, and Edna, I believe you want to speak what item 6 when we deal with the bus services. Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Tate, would you like to join us? And I think you'd know the ropes. Thank you. If I just address that before we start, in the minutes that we just referred to, which were circulated part of the pack, in there in the previous meeting was listed all the informal groups and its updates from those informal groups. You will find the list of those groups in the minutes of the previous meeting.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the Town Forum. As some of you may recall, back in January, I addressed the Town Forum and I raised a number of issues. Firstly, I congratulated officers and members for finally securing the necessary permission from Historic England for the cleaning and repair of the much cherished Buttercross and also Hyde Gate. Although I was criticised for the neglect of the Buttercross by the Lib Dems back in 2018, at least you have managed to get the necessary approvals, although it did take 6 years. At the time, Councillor Tippett Cooper explained that the work to the Buttercross, approved in November 24, would be undertaken in the summer, dependent on weather conditions and finding an appropriately qualified contractor. You may understand my frustration that even though the summer is now over and the one-day hat fair has taken place, nothing has happened. Was it because we had a lot of inclement weather over the summer? I don't think so. With Christmas fast approaching, I have to guess that the work won't be undertaken this year, as the scaffolding may well interfere with seasonal pedestrians freely moving around this section of the High Street, but possibly Councillor Tippett Cooper may tell me different. Similarly, Highgate, somewhere I seem to be at pretty much 2 or 3 times a week, another scheduled ancient monument, home to many feral pigeons, still looks unloved and dirty. Again, why has no action taken place? Just round the corner is the appalling derelict and now YouTube famous rotting old leisure centre. Yes, the new sports pavilion is being built, great news, but why the neglect of the old centre? I note that there is yet more consultation. I get many people approaching me, commercial as well as just citizens, about it. I recently attended the Hampshire Open Studios and Student Summer Art Exhibition at the Colour Factory, and it was unsurprisingly brilliant, and a number of members thankfully attended it. I've been helping the Colour Factory secure council funding for improvements to the building, yet it's in the shadow of the rotting leisure centre. Why is this administration seemingly incapable of getting things done? We should be so proud to live in such a wonderful city, such a historic city, but sadly neglect and inaction is apparent right across the city. If nothing else, please at least sort out the Buttercross, and in a timely fashion, if at all possible. Just as a postscript, I did go onto the website to see whether there are updates. Nothing for the Buttercross since last year. Highgate February this year. I wonder whether it's only ever prompted because of my badgering on about these issues, which I take very seriously. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Councillor Tippett Cooper, are you able to just update us on the progress on both Buttercross and Hyde Abbey Gate, please? Thank you.
I am, Chair, and always a pleasure to see you, Ian. On the Buttercross, Ian mentioned there quite rightly, sorry, Mr. Tate mentioned there that one of the potential difficulties may be the appointment of a contractor for the Buttercross. This work for the Buttercross can only be done by very specialist heritage contractors that can do this sort of skilled construction work on such delicate monuments. There was some difficulty finding an appropriate contractor. As I understand it, nationally there are very few, and indeed, as I understand it, one of the largest ones in the country has gone bust recently, which puts pressure on the small group of actual specialists that can do this. So unfortunately for this summer, it wasn't possible to get a contractor appointed in time. However, a contractor has now been appointed following a tendering process. So we've now got that contractor in place. And because, again, we go back to the really fundamental point of all of this, we have to make sure this work is done properly and carefully. Because we need the right weather conditions, given the nature of the material that we used, limestone in this case, and limestone mortar, and how that has to be carefully used in the right, so the most appropriate, the most optimal weather conditions, we'll have to wait until the spring, and at least the spring, until that work can happen. So spring 2026 is the aim now for the new contractor that has been appointed to do the work. So that's the update on the Buttercross. So a little bit longer than we'd hoped, Ian, but it's, you know, we want to keep this Buttercross protected in a great state for hundreds more years. So it's definitely important not to rush it now, just to meet something I said back in January of this year. Highgate, that is also progressing. The architect that has been appointed, you can read on the website the detailed plans that are going to be submitted to Historic England for that. We've now arranged for the architect to make that submission. I understand it'll be submitted soon. I'll quite happily update, and I'll update Ian. He's always do drop me an email, Ian. I'm always very happy to talk about these things as soon as that's been submitted. And as for the old leisure centre, well, I know Ian's fully aware that there is a really solid, clear plan for a final cabinet decision. Is the aim of the timeline for September 26. And before that, lots of excellent an excellent, clearly set out process for the next year, where the public will be consulted at several occasions. And we're really excited to see what expressions of interest come forward from partners that can help make that site the amazing place it could be.
Thank you very much for the update, clear update there, Councillor Tippett Cooper. Can I just ask the officers, or put in the minutes, that we should ensure that the website is updated with all the relevant information, so that anybody can go on there and get a clear update as to exactly what's happening. That would be good to have. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, item 6, Winchester bus services. I have one member of the public that wishes to speak on this subject. So Edna, would you like to join us at the table? I think you'd have to turn the mic on and start at your leisure. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Edna Bowden, and I have lived in Greenhill Road since 1971 and was a regular user of the number 4 bus. Living on a bus route was one of the main reasons I've managed to remain in my house as my age has encroached upon me, and like many other residents in the full flood area, I am distressed and angry that such a valuable community service has been taken away from us, especially as I see the new number 4 service goes from town to Highcliffe every hour, every day, including Sunday. The number 4 was a long-standing, valuable community bus service linked to Westgate School, which enabled full flood residents to get directly to Waitrose in one direction, the hospital and the railway station in the other, and a direct route into the town centre. A link to the local hospital is crucial for many residents. The axing of the number 4 bus service through full flood has put some elderly or infirm residents into isolation, both socially and mentally, and this could be damaging to their health and well-being. Taking a bus means meeting people, talking, socialising, and keeping our independence, all very important qualities for a healthy lifestyle. The bus is important for everyone, but for many full flood residents, the topography of the area makes it really difficult to lose this particular bus route. The hills up the Romsey Road and down to the Stockbridge Road, the nearest bus stops now, from the Poets Way Greenhill Road area, are very difficult for those with walking difficulties. Since the removal of this bus service, I have spoken with a couple of number 4 regular bus users, and they are already struggling. One lady who uses a roller walker and was a daily user of the number 4 now faces a 15-minute walk down to the Stockbridge Road to catch the number 3 into town, but cannot get back up the hill, so has to take a taxi home, costing £5 to £6. Another who uses crutches, has had 58 operations over the years and cannot walk downhill due to imbalance, is feeling very upset and isolated. She is currently relying on a friend to take her to doctor's appointments and town for shopping, but her only way home is by taxi, costing £5. It is a very unsatisfactory situation when elderly residents are forced to take a taxi simply because there is now no bus to take them home. Full Flood needs a bus. A door-to-door petition calling for the return of a bus service has received over 300 signatures and been handed to the local MP, Danny Chambers. On behalf of the Full Flood residents, I am asking Stagecoach to reconsider their decision. We are requesting all relevant parties to work together and return the bus service to the Full Flood area as soon as possible. We suggest a smaller bus and a regular timetable running 2 buses a day into town and back. Finally, councils are striving to lower pollution and keep cars out of the city. The government has given us a bus pass to make travel easier, and then Stagecoach takes the bus away. I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edna, and well done for doing it in 3 minutes. Very good pace. So thank you for coming along today, Edna, and you've made a very clear case as to why this bus service is so vital for many people in the full flood area. The route is particularly appreciated by elderly and those with mobility issues. It is a very hilly area, as you've laid out. As a council and as councillors, we're concerned about the residents for whom this is an absolutely vital service. There are people in full flood who rely on the number 4 bus to go to the doctors, to go shopping, and to continue to live independently. These people are now in a very difficult position. We have contacted the managing director of Stagecoach South, and they've come back to us. The challenge with the number 4 through full flood is it's always been an unsubsidised service with no public funding, but the usage is very low. And in a context where bus usage across Winchester is down overall due to reduced commuting, they can't justify subsidy or see it as the best use of resources at this point in time. We've also asked county officers why they didn't identify this route as socially necessary, something they have the power to do as the local authority, transport authority, and we're working to see if something be done down this route as well. Because we need a solution quickly for people who don't have another option, we've also contacted Community First Winchester and Good Neighbours Winchester to see whether those who are most vulnerable can be supported by the dial-a-ride or pre-book services until we sort things out with Stagecoach and Hampshire County Council. And both organisations have confirmed that they can help. We will be circulating contact information for both organisations to all houses in the full flood area very shortly. So rest assured, we're doing all we can to find a solution to this issue. For now, we must work on how to do that and how much it will cost. But it's so important to have a service like this. They're a lifeline to so many people in different ways. So thank you again for coming along. Thank you. Moving on, I'd like to welcome, sitting at the back, James O'Neill. If you'd like to come and join us at the table. James is Commercial Director at Stagecoach, and he's kindly offered to come along, after I asked him, to come along today to talk about some of the challenges of running bus services in the Winchester area. So just to introduce this particular subject, so in early August, Hampshire County Council and Stagecoach announced that we're making bus service changes in Winchester, including withdrawal of several routes like number 46 and 61 in Winchester, and as you've just heard, route number 4 in Full Flood and Teg Down. These cuts were due to commercial issues and also budget cuts at the end of specific funding periods, as well as cuts to services. Other services like 64 and 69 were being enhanced. So it wasn't all a one-way street. There was no consultation with us as local councillors or with Winchester City Council. As councillors, we found out about the decision at the same time as residents from notices attached to the bus stops. Many of us have received many complaints from residents about withdrawal of services, and there have been public protests supported by councillors and the Winchester MP at the withdrawal of both the 61 and number 4 service. And in addition, as you've heard, there has been a petition to Danny Chambers, Winchester MP, organised by Edna, that has been signed by 300 residents in the full flood area requesting the number 4 service be retained. I invited both Stagecoach and Hampshire County Council to address the committee today on the challenges they face on delivering bus services in Winchester. I'm delighted and grateful that James has joined us today to discuss the challenges of operating bus services in Winchester in a challenging period that has seen significant change in bus usage. Hampshire County Council are unable to join us at the meeting today, but have committed to a joined-up meeting between the City Council, the County Council and Stagecoach to discuss local bus services, and I'll work with the Cabinet Member for Movement Strategy, Councillor Learning, and Winchester City Council officers to set that meeting up. So James will give us a verbal update on delivering local bus services from a Stagecoach perspective, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions during that update. We can follow questions by debate to discuss city bus services in general and the impact of the changes that came into force at the end of August. On this item, there are no specific recommendations or actions related to it, but the outcome of our discussions can and will be taken forward to our meeting with Hampshire County Council and Stagecoach when that takes place. So with that, James, welcome again to the meeting. I hand over to you, and if you can take us through an update, and I'll let you deal with questions as you see fit, as we discussed before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you firstly for inviting me along this evening. As you said, my name is James O'Neill. I'm Commercial Director at Stagecoach South. So we are the principal operator of buses in this region. We have 8 depots across the central south of England, which Winchester is one, and our neighbouring depots in Andover Basin, so not far away. And then our extremities of the business, 3 depots on the south coast and a couple towards Surrey. Most of the buses we run operate on a commercial basis without subsidy. In the Winchester area, we run just under 50 vehicles, carry in the region of 2.5 million passengers a year. We employ a staff of approximately 150. And the services range from the Park and Ride, which is contracted on behalf of yourselves, Winchester City Council, and a majority of commercially funded, paid by the customers services within the city and beyond the city out towards Romsey, Alton, Fareham and Andover. Much of what I say in this meeting I can't be too specific on. As a commercial organisation, I can't give you detailed facts and figures in public about our passenger trends. I'm happy to be as informative as I can in that context. It's really difficult at the moment running buses. It's probably easier now than it was a couple of years ago, but we obviously went through a crisis period, as did much of the world, 5 years ago or so, when overnight our passengers disappeared, and we went from a relatively healthy bus network in 2019 to one carrying very few people for the next few years. And the government assisted the bus service network recovery through a variety of temporary funding programmes which helped keep buses running. Essentially, most of those funding streams have now stopped, and we're in a position where buses are expected to run once again based upon the number of people travelling. In the Winchester area, frustratingly, we're probably seeing the hardest recovery of commercial passengers than we are anywhere else in our 8 depot region. We think that's down to a number of factors. That might be employees at the county and city councils who are probably more likely to homework than they may have been before the pandemic. We recognise there will be people who commuted to London before who maybe don't do so as much now. We still have a relatively strong base of students, but many of the other routes, particularly within the city and most notably Park and Ride, are carrying very much fewer people than they were before, despite our best efforts to put mileage back on in the hope of attracting people, and also with the benefit of 2 years of government funded £2 single maximum fare, which really helped drive some numbers of people back to bus. That subsequently has become £3. So there's been lots of factors which have made it harder to run buses than it was 6 years ago. But that said, we still have, as I say, nearly 50 buses running around the area. And in the last couple of years, there have been some very specific government funded schemes to run new mileage, specifically new, with an expectation that bus operators around England can turn that pump funding, that kickstart funding, into commercially viable services within a relatively short time of 2 to 3 years. So in the Winchester area, some of that money has been used, as you mentioned, to add journeys to service 66, which is now every 30 minutes to Romsey, 64, where we're running up to every 20 minutes in the peak and every 30 minutes on Sundays, and a new service to Andover, which now runs hourly, including a brand new service on Sundays on that route. Unfortunately, that hasn't made it any easier to keep some of the existing services commercially viable. We recognise that for the small number of from the small number of subsidised services we do run, that our local transport authorities have a significant funding pressure. During 2024, Hampshire County Council did consult on a number of difficult decisions they were facing as part of their savings programme in 2025, which as a bus operator we were impacted by because some of the services we were contracted to run were affected. Those include the 61 and the 46, which come into Winchester, as well as one other service from Andover from Stagecoach. Our contracts for those routes came to a conclusion at the end of August and were not renewed. The funding decision on those services was not from us, and as far as I'm aware, it was due to a funding decision from the council. The other changes that were made, which we talked about, and obviously we've had some resident feedback on, include changes to our service 4 to Full Flood and Tegdown, and service 7 out to Sparsholt. Those were probably our weakest unfunded, fully commercial services in the city area. And in the case of service 4, was bringing in revenue to cover approximately 75% of its full running cost. The normal process when a bus route is in that position is obviously we do our best to control that cost and or bring more people out onto the service. Ideally, we never want to withdraw a service because our business is carrying people from A to B. Ideally, we find ways to encourage more people to travel. That has been very difficult despite the benefit of the fare cap despite some campaigns to promote free pass holders and attract new people to collect their free pass and travel by bus. Despite some Winchester area focused promotions on buses. We tried to control cost in September 2024 on Service 4 by removing a couple of afternoon journeys, which was by no means an easy decision, because we recognise as soon as you take a decision like that, it will affect the number of people travelling on the rest of the service as well. That made some difference, but still left us with a service which was significantly falling short of the amount of cost, essentially, that it was that we were spending running it. We were not bringing enough people to pay for that service to go out of the door each day. The decision we made earlier in the summer was that we couldn't continue in that position, and effectively Service 4 as it was has now been replaced by 2 journeys a day for Tegdown on Service 7, and Sparshot Village has 4 buses a day as part of Service 7 rather than an hourly route which it had before. We've continued provision for Sparshot College separately. There's a more frequent route which still exists on college days to serve the obviously far higher number of students using that. I'm very aware that the decision to run fewer buses for Tegdown and for Sparshot is a big impact on those communities. I'm also very well aware there is a very limited amount of funding available from our local authorities or any other authority to help bridge a gap between the number of people travelling and the cost of putting the bus there in the first place. The process we follow as a bus operator is that we can only make changes with 10 weeks notice. As part of our normal process, that means that for this service change, which started on the 1st of September, we wrote to Hampshire County Council during June to alert them of the changes we're planning to make. There's a window then of 4 weeks where the local authority can review what we're looking at, ask us questions and make a decision as to whether or not there's a case or indeed funding available to infill a gap or to put in place an alternative. On this occasion, we proceeded with the change, and essentially that's where we currently are. So the new Service 7 is providing an essential shopper service for the community at Tegdown. We weren't able to provide a service for Full Flood. The passenger numbers there were on average 5 to 6 people each day, which wasn't anywhere near enough to pay for at the time 5 buses in each direction. Very happy to take questions on that. Apologies, I covered quite a lot of detail, but hopefully that was useful.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions just to sort of unpack, because obviously you've not got any stats for us to digest, and rightly so, because you're a commercial business. Timing of the year journeys, I'd like to sort of explore that with you for a little bit. We've just had an absolutely extremely hot summer where probably lots of people will either get their bikes out and walk through different routes because the weather has actually been absolutely great. So I'm guessing that when you observe summers and timings of the year, you would anticipate a drop off in the summer using bus. But obviously now we're coming into a wet, colder winter. How does that play with your thinking? And obviously the pickup of the bus service may come into use. Added to that, how often do you consult, or does county council consult? Obviously, if they review because of their budget restrictions on the subsidies, do you ever come back to county and say, we're having so much pressure from our customers, even though we don't see it as a viable route because you're commercial, Bob? Do you then start to suggest to county relook at maybe subsidising the buses? Do you take the initiative yourself on behalf of your customers who suddenly have got a bus that's gone missing on their route for whatever reason? So a couple of things: the timing of the year, does that have an impact, and how do you take something back to the county and say, because of your lack of subsidies now, we're under pressure from our customers, which maybe you'd feel probably unfair in that respect. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, no, those are fair questions. In terms of timing of the year, we don't just look at quiet times of year or indeed busy times of year before making a decision. So in terms of how our business is structured, we have accounting periods every 4 weeks, and we break down our income, costs and revenue per service, every route across our business every 4 weeks. And obviously then we review those year-to-date positions and year-end positions. So the decisions that were taken were based upon the whole picture and not a small part of it. We also routinely, well, every 4 weeks, look at passenger trends. So we'll know whether something is growing or in decline. And we'll know whether that is based upon free bus pass holders growing or in decline, or fare payers. And as you'd expect, we can look at different ticket sales, as well as how many passengers board at each bus stop location on every service. So there's a lot of detail that goes in. And as I mentioned, fundamentally my job is to make sure we carry people from A to B. I don't get paid if I don't carry people from A to B, so it is fundamental that it's in our interest to do that. So any negative step is always the absolute last resort, and because to not do so would risk undermining other routes and the wider business, and ultimately our residents' bus services. In terms of consultation, that is, sorry, I'll do a different bit first. I will talk about consultation. Our relationship with the local authority. So we operate in under an enhanced partnership. So every bus operator has formal meetings with its local transport authorities to discuss the growth and mechanisms for investing in the wider bus network, growing passenger numbers. That'll include things like highway interventions as well. We also have one-to-one meetings with Hampshire County Council, where we will be more explicit about the trends on our network, which we by necessity can't do in front of other operators. So in those meetings, we will be talking about things that are doing well and things that are not. And without going into too much detail, we have made reasonably clear to Hampshire that Winchester is our area where there is a bit more concern, unfortunately. There are good things in there. We're getting very good growth on some of our interurban routes, because the £2 and now £3 cap has really helped drive growth. And obviously, we recognise there's new housing in Alton, Alresford, and in Romsey as well, which has helped boost that. So it's not all a negative picture, but specifically some of the smaller routes in the city are difficult. We're open to consultation with customers and residents. I think where that's really difficult, and why we didn't do it this time, is where there isn't actually a plan B, in essence, because we're not in a position, once we recognise the service is in decline and losing money, we can't easily offer an alternative other than it needs subsidy, there isn't any, and that's therefore an outcome. This doesn't happen very often, I have to say. It doesn't happen very often. We're in a position where buses don't run at all, where we take something off the map. It is an exception to the rule, but we have carried out customer feedback processes in other areas. Most notably, we did one for a fairly significant network review in our Worthing area earlier in the year. So it's not that we won't, it's just that we have to recognise what we're trying to get out of it.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just looking at my phone. I believe the last time Stagecoach came in, and I can't remember, I'm sorry if it was yourself or it was you, yes. I mentioned, or I asked about the possibility of new routes and whether you actually look at the city as a whole and sort of and look where development's taking place. And the bit that really lacks any bus service now, particularly now the number 4's gone, is through Chilbolton Avenue. And whilst that doesn't actually help the residents of Full Flood, where the number 4 went through, because of the topography, it's really too hilly for a lot of the elderly residents to, make the cut through. There are several cut throughs to Chilbolton that from the Poets, for instance, estate, and also Bath Place off Green Hill Road. But we have had substantial development in Chilbolton Avenue, and yet there is no bus service there. So I just wonder whether you might want to comment on that again. On the number 4, just in particular, I mean, obviously you've heard from Edna Bowden tonight, and I know you've received a lot of representation from residents, and I hear what you say about you didn't feel you could consult them, but just sticking a notice up on the bus stops just does seem a little bit inadequate, really. And because I think if people realised several months in advance that maybe they were going to lose the service, they may have put a bit more effort into actually using it and making your numbers more positive. I mean, certainly on that last bus ride, a number of councillors actually joined the number 4 going into town, and then the last one going back to Flood, and it was absolutely packed. With a number of paying passengers too. I was one of them. So not just people on bus passes, and there was a really broad cross section of the community there, young families, as well as the other less able customers too. So I just want, and we were disappointed that you didn't sort of come to us, even though we're not the Transport Authority, even as ward councillors, you know, Councillor Todd, Councillor Westwood and myself for the area of Flood, just to let us know that actually the service was going to be cut. That you know, that is just something that would have been helpful really to know, because we found out exactly the same time as the passengers did, and you know, we were just as shocked, really.
No, thank you. I understand that. I think when I was here a year ago, it was in relation to Service 4 at that time and the difficult changes we made to the afternoon. And I guess at that point, it was relatively clear that the service was probably struggling. And that, unfortunately, you know, the change we made was with the best attempt to try and control cost without losing too much headcount. In the end, that hasn't worked, hasn't made enough difference. It is really difficult. I recognise a lot of people will take an interest when a service is coming off. I wish those people were travelling every day normally, because then we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. We might be running more buses, but they won't and don't. And it is very difficult, because I think the Service 4 was in the position where it was a comfort bus service for many people, many residents, that if they needed the bus, they knew there was one, but they weren't actively using it on a daily basis. And ultimately, that is what we need. In terms of new residential developments, that's a subject I agree with you on. We do, again, we're a commercial business by and large. We take an active interest in where we can expand our network, where we can run more service, generate more passenger numbers, and ultimately grow our footfall. Being slightly generic, the average cost of running one vehicle on a brand new service is in the region of £250,000 a year. To run a service properly at a reasonable frequency that makes it attractive probably is going to take at least 2 or 3 vehicles. So we're already looking at a bare minimum of probably £500,000 of upfront cost. And for any organisation, that's a significant investment, when on day 1, week 1, month 1, you'll take very few ticket sales that help offset that cost. Our ask is that as part of the planning process and the consideration of where houses are built, that there is actually a more detailed review of what is likely to be required for essential services in order to make that development sustainable. Frustratingly, across our region, it's not a Winchester specific problem. We see far too many new residential developments come forward with no bus service obligation whatsoever, no contribution, or where there is actually a bus service contribution, they're then constructed in such a way as to actually not make buses accessible until residents have largely moved in and started travelling already, usually by car, of which there are obviously examples within the Winchester area already. There are many examples where that hasn't happened, and bus services have prospered with funding at the right time. But I'd say on balance, probably the majority happen either without funding or with funding that doesn't then get delivered sustainably. The trajectory from run a bus on day one to it being hopefully well on its way to commercial is 5 to 7 years in my estimate. So that's the amount of funding we'd likely need from empty when it starts to carrying healthy numbers at the end. And that's assuming you can deliver it in such a way that it's frequent, goes where people want it to go, and people do genuinely use it as they move in. It's a really tough call. It's definitely something we want to do more of, but we need help through the planning process to make sure that is actually funding allocated to that.
Councillor Eve.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillors Thompson and Scott have touched on some of the things I wanted to cover, but I did just want to say again, I think part of what has been coming up again and again is the feeling that people weren't asked about it, but also the lack of notice. I know a lot of the services we only found out a week or two before, and for a lot of people that was obviously before school term started. So a lot of people, for example, trying to get from the Spa shelter, Peter Simmons have struggled. Slightly outside the area of this is students in the southwest of the district going to Eastleigh. I guess just generally, can we get a bit more, even if it's not engagement, although I would like to see more engagement in the future if there are other changes, just a bit more communication, a bit more advance notice, I guess, for residents.
Yeah, I understand that. Specifically for Service 61, it obviously wasn't our news because it was part of Hampshire's budget consultation. I think, I can't quote it, unfortunately, because it wasn't my news. I think the decision was made in November 2024, so it was a press topic then, and that is obviously a huge amount of notice, to the point where probably most people had forgotten that that was a service cut when it was finally then delivered in September this year. From our side, the notice period setup is quite tricky. So when I said we went to Hampshire in June to discuss where we were, ultimately that doesn't then get delivered or confirmed until the 4-week period where Hampshire have a right to review is concluded, which puts us in mid-July. And then I think we got notices out for the start of August. So I take your point, but we're slightly constrained by the process on that level. There's never a good time to do it. There's never a good period of notice to do it either. But yeah, I accept the comments there.
Councillor Reach.
Thank you, Chair. One of the changes was the positive improvement of the Service 69 between Winchester and Fareham, running a more direct route out of the city. You talked before about highways improvements. One thing that struck me is the 69 is a very local issue. Stops in town at Chesil Street, and then its next stop is Twyford, because there are no fixed stops between there and Twyford. It does pass the leisure centre, which I think is a big driver of demand. I mean, there's certainly very popular people travel by bus to get there. So I'm just wondering if there's scope. I suspect it's probably a county matter to put a bus stop in.
I'm just trying to think whether it will stop at all bus stops on line of route normally. There is a bus stop for the leisure centre. I'm just trying to think whether it's placed only in a place that Park and Ride can use it, which might be the issue.
It's on Barfield Close here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we would stop if there was a stop. It's something we can raise. It, you know, again, I don't like barriers to entry. I'd rather more people travel on the route. The fallback would be to obviously divert the bus on the Park and Ride route, which I'll be honest, we didn't particularly think about. We chose the change of route in order to certainly give the reality, not just the perception, that the 69 takes a more direct route out of the city. St Cross Road obviously can get very congested, as of course can the M3. That was the reason. It certainly wasn't because we didn't want to stop at stop. So yeah, it's a question worth us asking, or we can review where we go.
Councillor Erney.
Thank you, Chairman. I did come in on the bus today, and I'm pleased to say that it was virtually packed with people. So we do have a number of very successful services around town, and I think it's important for us to say that, you know, it's not all doom and gloom around the buses. Generally, I catch the number 3, but every now and again, when it's been tipping down, I've caught the number 4, which goes at least in the right direction. And actually, by the time it's gone through full flood, got stuck behind a rubbish collection lorry, failed to get round a corner because there's been a car parked on a yellow line somewhere, it would have been quicker walking. I think we do understand the frustrations the company has with that, but that does also directly affect the demand for that particular service. So I think we do recognise that we do need to have a look at how we can re-provide that as a social service in some way, rather than expecting you to run a successful commercial service back through that route. One of the things that we're always told is that if we ran smaller buses, then it would be much better. Can you talk a little about the commercial reality of running a small bus instead of a full-size bus?
That's a big question. Yeah, okay. So the service for was generally using a larger vehicle than clearly it needed for the number of people using it. That's because the same vehicle was operating school journeys at school time and college journeys after that. So ultimately, every vehicle that leaves the depot, the size of bus is determined by the busiest point on its day, which does mean that we fairly frequently get asked why a double-decker is running around a small village with 15 people on it, and that's why, because actually we wouldn't run two different vehicles on a piece of work that could be done with one vehicle, for the same reason as people generally don't own a big car and a little car, depending on whether they're going shopping or not. So we do run smaller vehicles, and as you say, they're absolutely the right thing to do in some circumstances. The cost of a van derived minibus is significantly more expensive now than it probably would have been even a decade ago. We'd be talking over £100,000 now for a minibus, which means it's cost per seat in order to put a driver on it, who we pay the same rate, pay for the vehicle, put in less fuel, but still a reasonable amount of fuel. It means the cost per seat is very high compared to a double decker, which, I say, drivers pay the same. The bus is a bit more expensive, use a little bit more fuel, but ultimately has far more seats you can sell. So bigger buses, assuming you get the demand right, become more viable than small ones, assuming that concessionary pass holders will still travel for free because that's their right to do so, and there's a natural limit as to how much we can charge commercial customers who won't pay £10 a head just because the bus is small.
Councillor Murphy.
Hi, just a couple of questions. One very general one, which is, I mean, you brought along the specific ask about the support for where we've got new build and actually building up the service as more quickly and getting it in place. I mean, there's sort of, do you have any specific asks that you brought along or would have in mind? And also, those, can you have in mind that if you develop a specific ask, we do want to hear, we're very keen for you to be proactive and come to us, because we so that we can take action if possible. And then the other question was really just, as I was thinking about this building up of usage, how much damage does disruption through roadworks do to the services that you're running? It feels like we've had quite a lot recently, and quite extended ones in place for weeks and going into months. And is there anything, any way we, or I mean, I suppose it would be mostly county, but actually we're still potentially involved locally, that we could help with that, if only to make awareness and maybe support the build back up if it has been damaged through roadworks.
Fairly frequently the biggest cause of complaint is my bus didn't arrive on time. And it's a bit of a quip, but also generally I think when someone's in their car running late, stuck in traffic, they blame the traffic, and if someone's at the side of the road waiting for a bus in the same traffic, they say the bus is late. We do get the perception that we should always be on time, even though we can't control the traffic. And you're right, the recent period of roadworks around City Road along Romsey Road, over the summer, our on-time performance dropped by over 10% on our key city routes, and ultimately that probably means we left a lot of people standing around waiting for a bus. We always do our best. We have spare drivers and buses allocated every day to step in and try and reduce the impact that delays do have. But ultimately, on a really bad day, there's a limit to how far that goes, because we don't want to have lots of drivers sitting around on days where actually there is no particular traffic issue. I think that the M3 works are a concern on the horizon as well. Well, at the moment, as well as on the horizon for as they progress, particularly for our service out to Winnell, service 2. Stagecoach and another of the national bus operators has produced a guidance document for new developments aimed at not only local transport and local planning authorities, but quite particularly the developers and their consultants. That's available online, and I'm very happy to share that with the council afterwards. That document briefs our ask, if you like, for how new residential developments should be laid out. It includes location of bus stops, how frontages should look, consideration of car parking, space of bus stops, widths of road, what good and bad looks like. I know that doesn't mean that therefore once seen it's delivered, but it's a good step to understanding actually what goes right, what goes wrong, and how can that be considered as part of the process. So generally that's what we do. In terms of niche, what developments could we do in Winchester? So that's not really something I can talk about in this forum. There are ideas that we do have, but we could pick that up separately.
I don't see. Councillor Todd. Got two questions, and I wanted to refer back to the comments of Mrs. Bowden. The first is she explicitly raised the idea of a less frequent 4 service. In practice, something on a fairly similar frequency to the number 7 going through takedown. And I just wondered if there was a way of doing something similar. I recognise it wouldn't be a number 4 anymore, but is that something you can think about? Is there a way of taking the 7 or another route and doing something similar that you're doing with takedown? That was sort of one question. And then the second thing she talked about, and I realise this sits outside your area, but I imagine as an industry insider, it's something you'll know about. And she touched on the social impact of buses, the impact they have in terms of enabling people to get to school, people being independent. I mean, what is actually known about the impact of that and the importance of it, and the importance for example, long-term social care costs? I mean, we have a situation at the moment where the county is surprised that its social care costs go up and up and up, but at the same time it's cutting support for services that would keep people independent, physically active, socialising, and then is surprised that its social care costs go up, but perhaps it shouldn't be. So I'd be 2 questions. One is there an option, a way of coming up with a less frequent service of the kind that Mrs. Bowden talked about that goes through full flood? And the second was, what is your perspective on these wider social benefits of bus services?
I'll take the second one first. I can't off the top of my head point to a specific study which might identify that connection that you're suggesting. It's logical. I can't disagree. We know that customers using our services will be travelling to work, and don't know whether or not they'll be able to do that in the absence of us. They might be travelling to a hospital appointment or to school, college, and those things have a value. And as I said, we're a large business. We carry a couple of million passengers a year just from this small part of it, and those people are contributing to the wider economy, and that clearly has value, economic as well as social. I think in terms of where it sits in the hierarchy of how you justify spend and balancing those demands, that's not really mine to answer, but I understand your question. In terms of delivering something less frequent but maybe an essential service for the full flood area, going back to our data looking at really small numbers of people travelling from those stops in the region of 5 people per day, it's clearly not something which is going to be commercially sustainable for us, but I accept there might be some things we look at relatively lower cost. It's something we can take a look at. I think we can come back and have a conversation perhaps about what that balances out as. If there is extra cost to do something by diverting a route, as long as it isn't a mainstream service that obviously puts off other customers, it's really difficult because we don't want residents of Sparsholt or Littleton to then have the inconvenience mentioned from Councillor Learney, that they feel like they were nearly in town and then went on a 10-minute diversion somewhere else, because that then puts those people off as well. So that's the balance we take. It's not necessarily just, well, we don't want to go there and, you know, 2 people can suffer. We've got to make sure we consider the interests of those other people who are trying to get to a destination within a reasonable time as well. But we can think about it and come back to you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Becker.
Thank you. I'm genuinely surprised to hear that you don't understand, you don't have the information about the social value of the bus service. Does Hampshire genuinely not ask for that sort of information when they're taking decisions about the impact of bus cuts on the population?
I think the council does. Yeah, I can't speak for them.
But where do they get that information from then? If it's not from you, if it's not from the actual people using the bus, understanding, you know, why people are using the bus, what is going to be the effect on them if the bus service is cut? Are they going to a hospital appointment? Are they using it for work? Not having any of that information available just calls into question the validity of their decision making if they cannot understand the impact of that bus cut on the people actually using that bus service.
I don't think that's a question for me. I think there are impact assessments done as part of the local authorities consultation process. Ultimately, from the changes we make as a commercial organisation, we need to ensure that the number of people travelling are covering the cost of us running the service, or there is some subsidy that we've been able to secure to make up any shortfall, and that's our position ultimately. I recognise every customer using a bus is doing so for a reason. I'd like them all to be choosing to use the bus as a principal decision, and choosing not to drive and cause additional congestion. I don't necessarily know what they're all then doing once they leave the bus, but I'm absolutely sure all of those people will be doing something to contribute to wider economy or social benefit. My response was that I couldn't point you to a place where that information exists in a cohesive way.
No, that's fine. I would urge Stagecoach as a commercial organisation to start to look at their social value, because that is something that lots of organisations are now doing, not just public organisations, but wider commercial organisations are also looking at their social value of the services they operate and what they offer in terms of environmental benefits, in terms of social health benefits. As an organisation, if Stagecoach could go and look at that, I think that would be a really beneficial thing as an organisation to do, given you are effectively filling what used to be a public function of providing public transportation, and in some places it's still a public function.
Yeah, as an organisation, we do assess our social value. I think that's a slightly different question to the impact that each customer has as a member of society. So we routinely provide information on as part of tender processes for our local authorities, for example, information on what we do as a business to contribute to the regions we're in. That would include the number of people we employ, the quality of our vehicles, what we're doing to reduce emissions, recycling. We do some voluntary charity work. There's all sorts of things that we do as a business which I could talk to you about. That's not quite the same thing as what does that individual at home do if they haven't got a bus, because I don't know the individual's contribution. I think that's a question which is really a population question, which is probably a local authority question.
Okay, I think I have to call time on questions in a second, but Councillor Morris, I think you've got a question.
Thank you. Yes, if I can sort of elaborate or pick up on what Councillor Todd's point regarding the number 7 service. At the moment, I was understood that when buses run on different schedules during the day, that customers find that confusing. They don't know which bus to catch. They go, sometimes the bus is stopping here, sometimes it isn't. And whether it might be helpful for the bus number 7 route to have a consistent schedule throughout the day, so that it's always going up, take down, and so that it's always going to Littleton. Not least because at the moment, most of the journeys, certainly from weeks to the city, are duplicating the number 3 bus service. And clearly, if you want both those services to be commercially viable, you want as little duplication as possible. And while I've got the microphone, I'll just ask a second question, is just, are there any other services that you would consider to be under review for commercial viability that we should know about so we can start telling the customers, you know, use it or lose it?
In answer to the second question first, to be honest, in a public forum, I can't comment on viability of some services over others. I'm just not able to do that. We are in a position where the vast majority of the buses we run are seeing growth or in a position where we're comfortable with what is happening. There are a lot of unknowns in the system. Those range from our costs. We have struggled in recent years, not particularly at the moment, to encourage new drivers to join us, and we're in a highly competitive environment for driving jobs. We therefore have to adjust our wages accordingly, and that's a cost factor which we can't always predict in detail. In terms of our revenue, obviously there's currently a ceiling on how much we can charge each customer based upon the government's £3 cap. That reimbursement which comes to us from the DfT is reassessed at this point from January next year, when we assume the scheme will continue. And again, that level of reimbursement that we get is part of our decision making into cost versus revenue on each service. So in a very broad sense, it's a constant review. I can't give you specifics on what's good and what's bad in this forum, but you know, every small action we take is designed to get us a positive outcome, and by encouraging more people or, you know, keeping services viable, I say it's the absolute last resort when the reverse does happen. In terms of Service 7 and keeping each trip doing the same route, yeah, I understand that point completely. We tried to make that and its parallel service 77, which exists to move Sparshott College students. We tried to make the best of both of those two routes so that we weren't duplicating and therefore adding more cost. So in some cases, there are some journeys on the 77 or the 7 which go to Sparshott College still, and the 77 which go to the village. Probably that's something we can try to tidy up a little bit once we've seen what demand actually is from this month and going forward, and try and keep it a little more consistent and clear for customers. I don't want it to look complicated, but we might need to do a bit of work on that.
Okay, I see no more questions, but I'm going to ask one now. Here's my turn at the end, and I've got a couple. Price is a factor when I speak to people. If you've got a family, two adults, 2 kids, getting the bus is quite expensive. Is there any, in your experience, is there any pricing structure that would work better for people to get more fare paying people on buses rather than take their car out?
So we do offer a group ticket in all our networks. So within the Winchester city area, we have a cheaper range of tickets than the tickets that obviously go beyond the city boundary out to Alton, Andover, Fareham, etc. So within Winchester, it's £5.50 for an adult day ticket, and a group ticket for 4 people. Any 4 people is double that, so it's £11. So in essence, it's to go free, whether those are children or a group of 4 adults. And there's a further discount for individuals. If you buy 5-day tickets and on our mobile app, you get a 20% discount, so that makes it £4.40. So we think that's really competitive. I think if you look at the cost of bus travel, unfunded bus travel in other towns and cities, I think that's still a really good price, particularly given our geography and our place in a relatively expensive part of the country. The £3 fare cap has distorted the normal commercial sales function of bus companies. That's not just a Stagecoach question. It's been really good for driving volume, particularly on longer distance routes where £3 is cheaper than significantly cheaper than it used to be, and obviously £2 before it was even cheaper again. When we went from £2 in December to £3 cap in January, we saw lots of people move from singles in a place like Winchester into buying day tickets again, because obviously the value proposition changed. We're still really learning from that. And again, that might change depending on the next step with the government's £3 fare cap, whether that continues or does not. Ultimately, everything is a balance, and we're trying to attract more people to buy more tickets and travel on the network. If lots more people travelled, that would help us stabilise price, and if that's not true, sometimes we need to raise cost. We don't control all those other costs coming into us, of course. That's the challenge. I think at the moment the government's single fare cap has really helped prove that one simple, consistent, easily remembered number does drive volume. Maybe we wouldn't have known that before 2023. But its success and continuation is very much dependent on the income coming in topped up by the government.
Yeah, thank you. Volume is what we need here. And my final question, sitting in your seat looking at us, we're not the Transport Authority, we're not Hampshire County Council, we're the District Council. Is there anything from your seat that you think we can do to help you make the bus services in this city more successful? What are the top couple of things we can help you with?
I recognise the City Council has played a really strong part in bus services in Winchester, not least with the Park and Ride, which has been a flagship service, and we're really proud to have been the operator of it since its inception and keep investing in it. It's disappointing that COVID has probably damaged its passenger base in the short term, and I'm very hopeful that will continue to recover. So I think whilst you're not the Transport Authority, it's got to be noted that the council's played a really strong part in helping do something to encourage people to not necessarily drive their car through the historic city centre. Broadly, I think we've picked up on all the main points. For me, planning and the balance of congestion and highways management, which I recognise is not your authority, how parking is placed and pricing and availability of parking, positioning of bus stops within the city, and how to balance the requirements for what should be encouraging more people to come by bus into the city, and making sure that we do have a good, strong, welcoming shop floor when we arrive in the city. Those are all really key. I think it's always going to be a relatively challenging demographic for us in this area, because it's a high cost of living in this area, a large number of bus pass holders. Those are very different demographics to some of our bigger cities in the region, but our business is relatively strong. So I think making sure we can run a bus that is on time is fundamental. So it's not just the traffic and the highway, it's how traffic flows, where people are trying to get to, where car parks are, whether those the cost of parking undermines the cost of the bus. Those are all really strong factors for us.
Thank you very much. Can I thank you, James, for your time today and your patience sitting there and answering all of our questions. You represent a commercial organisation. I thoroughly understand that you need to run these services that works for your business. From our side of the table, we have the duty to represent the people that we represent as elected members, and clearly we need to find ways to provide the services they need somehow, and deliver the points that Councillor Becker was talking about in terms of the social value and taking that account. And in terms of your points, Councillor Becker, that's absolutely front and centre when we meet with Hampshire County Council, as the kind of conversation we need to have with them when talking about the bus services. So thank you so much. I hope we've not given you too hard a time, and you'll speak to me again after this, and we will catch up following this meeting. That's okay. So thank you very much. So I'll open this up for debate if I may. So is there any debate on the subject? Councillor Reach.
Thanks, Chair. Just referring to earlier comments, it wouldn't have been fair to be too unkind, since as I say, it's from a commercial organisation, but it bears remark that Stagecoach made around 7% profit margin on their bus services last year, paid a very healthy dividend to their shareholders. So there is a cost of providing services commercially, over and above if they were provided socially, which could well tip marginal routes over into being unprofitable. With the advent of a mayor for our region who will likely have transport responsibilities, one of the candidates for which is in the room with us now, I think it'd be really interesting to see whether a more strident policy with respect to provision of bus services that might include franchising could see those marginal routes, which we've heard are so important to residents in and around Winchester and across the wider region, being provided through cross-subsidisation from money that would have been paid out to shareholders. I think it could be a very exciting time for buses coming up, and the old model of making as much money as you can clearly doesn't work anymore, in my view.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I think he's obviously been put in a very awkward situation, because it would have been very helpful if the county council was sitting next to him and could have taken some of our strong questioning. Obviously, he's providing the bus. His company's providing the bus service, but it sounds sometimes it's like it sounds as if, like, 1 minute it's like a library service. If you don't use it, it's going to be taken away. I think sometimes our factors come into play, like the social element of why people go on a bus. Sometimes they go because obviously you need hospital appointments, doctor appointments, they want to go into town. But sometimes it's a social element. They go on the bus because they know they can, especially if they live in a lonely environment on their own, they get on the bus because they want to talk to people and they want to go to A to B to get out the four walls. So that social element is such an important thing to take into consideration. It'd be all interested if we were all flies on the wall when they have their one-to-one meetings with the county, especially when county have drawn back because of their budget restraints on the subsidies. And it sounds as if the county council has thrown Stagecoach under the bus in that respect, because obviously they're now drawn back on the subsidy rates, taking in consideration if they've actually got quite a good profit margin for their shareholders. Maybe they needed to take some considerations of what we're saying. Winchester is hilly, Winchester has a high Asian population, but also at the same time has young families who want to get around on the bus as well. And the price of tickets has to remain quite low because obviously of the cost of living restraints on our families as well. But it'll be interesting, hopefully next time, if we do get Stagecoach come to the town forum, or the town council, if it comes in a year's time or whatever, that county council will have the decency to turn up with them and answer some questions. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Todd.
Yes, I mean, I think in the end, what we've learned this evening is we're running into the barrier of the logic of the current system, which is these independent companies setting up their own networks. And then the county, which we know is under tremendous financial pressure, supposedly being able to fund social routes, but something, frankly, that has been cut back, non-stop for as long as I can remember. The BSIP funding is a slightly different question. For as long as I've been a councillor, and so I do think we need a deeper look at the system. We need a system that properly takes into account the social value and the social impact that it has, the impact it has in terms of people being able to get to the doctor, but importantly, to stay active, to socialise, to meet people, to be able to live the lives they want to lead. I think the other thing that really strikes me, and we didn't really get into it today, is the importance of having one system. So for example, at the moment, there's been a bit of discussion about the number 69 to Fareham, and people are saying, well, it doesn't go down St Cross Road. And of course, there is a bus that goes down the St Cross Road very frequently, which is the Blue Star 1, but it's a different company. I mean, it's a different company. You can't buy one ticket and go on both of them. You can't buy a season ticket or an area ticket or a day pass and go on both buses. And one of the biggest arguments for franchising, I think, is that it would enable us to look at that and be able to say, well, let's just have a Winchester ticket and it works on everything, which is not currently the situation at the moment. So, you know, I do hope that the commitment that we heard to have a look at seeing how we can get a bus serving full flood again. It won't be the number 4, but a service on the kind of frequency that was talked about by raised by Mrs. Bowden is something that we need to follow up on, and that is important. And it, but most of all, it does say it's time for a change in terms of how we organise buses in Hampshire, because the current system isn't delivering what we need, and it's been very useful and appreciated that, you know, they have given their time to come and talk to us today. But one of the things that comes out of it is throwing that fundamental challenge into really sharp relief. The system we have, the combination of county council that's under, you know, has run out of money, which supposedly is meant to be fulfilling this social value, and then different companies that aren't joined up enough in terms of how they work, and certainly aren't joined up with trains and the other types of transport we have, says that we have a systemic problem, and that system has to change so that we get better buses for everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Aaron.
Thank you. Councillor Basil just reminded me, but also I remember speaking to a resident about the bus that we protested about recently, which is this the apparent contradiction between, you know, this thing of having a movement strategy which is greener and it gets cars off the road, stops congestion, stops pollution. That's all encouraged in the movement strategy, which is endorsed by the county council, but their actions do not support their own policy, and it's a crying shame that we're all thinking about cars because of the cost and because of the inconvenience of not having a bus locally to our doorstep. So it's very frustrating. But that's the point I would make, that it's a big climate issue as well, and a big congestion and pollution issue.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Thanks. I was interested to hear the rationale behind the late notice of the notification of the changes, and I would express dissatisfaction with their efficiency as an organisation here, because we can understand the commercial imperatives of running a bus service, but actually press releases don't cost very much money, and the way this is managed is customers hear rumours from a bus driver, there's gossip going around, and then eventually a sign goes up on the bus stop, when it would be much more effective press management if they just emailed all the stakeholders at once on one day and gave a clear summary of what is proposed. Because as it stands, it just creates unnecessary confusion and stress and alarm amongst customers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eve.
Yes, I think it's just worth following on again if Hampshire has been here today, some of the questions we might have asked them. I can't help but think of what further costs, whether this really is cost saving, how many people who currently live independently will no longer be able to, how many people will miss appointments at the GP or at the hospital until it gets worse. So again, disappointed Hampshire wasn't here today. I think there's a lot of questions we would have asked.
Any further debate? No whatsoever. So, adding my sixpence, I I think the decisions that are being made, I agree with Councillor Todd and everything you said, this is not joined up and it's a systemic problem. But we're not looking at, we've got a commercial organisation here looking at the commercial problem. Nobody, it seems, is looking at the broader problem. I've got a couple who live in full flood area who probably going to have to sell up and move out and go into a care home. What is the cost of going to a care home compared to the cost of the bus? Does anyone know? Has anyone asked? I doubt it. So there's a much bigger issue here that we need to grab hold of and grasp. In terms of the specific issue on city routes around here, then yes, we can go and get a sort of system or something to fill in the gap in full flood, but no one seems to be thinking about the routes. We didn't talk about the routes, where the demands truly is, where the stops needs to be. I mean, James alluded to it when I asked him if there's things we could do about it. But I think there's so much wrong that I don't quite know where to start. But I'm glad that we got the meeting with County and with Stagecoach and with Winchester. Go along, we'll take this information with us and we can see where we start. We also have a meeting independently, directly with Stagecoach, I believe, to talk about the number 4 area and the full flood area, as Councillor Todd has alluded, the number 7. So I think that's good piece of news as well. So thank you all for your contribution there. I think this is worthwhile, so I'm pleased I brought it onto the menu. I will put on the record my thanks to Stagecoach for turning up, and I thought that James was really good. He answered his questions honestly. He tried to say it as it was. He's obviously got commercial confidence that he can't give away, which I understand. But I'm so grateful for Stagecoach turning up here, and just like to put that on the record. Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 7, which is the town account financial planning. Councillor Learning, would you like to introduce?
Thank you. I'll try to keep it brief. The purpose of the report this evening is to set out the financial position of the Winchester town account and consider the medium-term forward-looking projections prior to the budget setting process. The town forum is funded through special expenses, and unlike a parish council, we are subject to the government capping limit. We have assumed an annual 3% increase in the town charge in line with the anticipated capping limit and also inflation. We have some good budget news in that the night bus budget is no longer required, as the number 3 evening buses now have enough passengers to be fully commercial, and only a partial provision has been required this year. Now, this is an interesting, following our conversation earlier on this evening, because the night bus has been a success. Initially covering late night weekends only at a time when the last bus anywhere went before 9:30, the subsidy for the 3 and 5 has encouraged later buses every weeknight, and the expansion in late bus services beyond the town to Kingsworthy and Alresford, which I think does demonstrate that a bit of pump priming to bus services, even though it has been 10 years before they've become fully commercial, can be a success. It's just having the will to really keep going when you can see that it's making a difference. The other area of cost saving is in bus shelter cleaning and maintenance, which has been taken on by the county council, with the exception of those connected to the park and ride service. While the finances are now looking healthy, as covered in paragraph 12.16, we can now meet the target level for our reserve balances. However, we do have some significant cost increases expected down the line, including increases in costs for public conveniences, which, as everyone knows, are very important to us, a renewal of the grounds maintenance contract, and some significant uncertainties going forward. The biggest area of uncertainty is the impact of local government reorganisation and the outcome of the community governance review into the creation of a new town council. Without prejudging either of those, changes are likely to happen in the middle of our 5-year budget outlook, and we do have a working party looking into how finances might change as a result and the impact any transitional costs might have. So we do have some big issues to think about, and with our finance officer who's here with us today, Darren Kennedy, I'm happy to take questions, Chairman, and consider members' thoughts on the budget going forward.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Reach.
Thanks, Chair. It's good to hear that the town account is in a good position. The reserves that we have in it, and I understand the reason why we've increased the level of reserves, they're starting to look quite chunky. Should we not be spending that on something nice, please?
Yes, I did mention some of the uncertainties that are hanging over us at the moment, but I think those reserves do give us the opportunity to fund some items which have dropped off as a result of recent financial pressure, including some big items such as the River Park Park Plan, which we did commit to a number of years ago, but effectively got kiboshed by COVID and the consequential financial problems. We've got grants which we were planning to cut, and I think there is the opportunity to look at reinstating that, as well as delivery of the wider Winchester town vision, and looking at whether there are some projects we might be able to fund which would contribute to achieving that. The other area to think about is playground refurbishment. We did make significant cuts to our plans for playground refurbishment, some of which were actually very sensible and mean that we'll be extending the life of our playground equipment rather than prematurely scrapping quite a lot of it. So we'd want to maintain that principle. But we are now a couple of years into what is meant to be a rolling 5-year programme, so we will want to look at what we might want to do in a couple of years' time. As I say, we obviously have potentially a reorganisation in the middle of that, but I still think we want to leave action programmes in place for any successful authority, and also to give clarity about what is affordable within existing finances.
That's Todd.
Yeah, I've got a question. I suppose what my question is, one of the things that actually can prove surprisingly difficult is to unlock SIL projects. And I'm just wondering, I don't know if that would sit within the grants and vision delivery, whether there's an opportunity to look at how we could spend some money that could then unlock other money. I mean, for example, we had a meeting the other day with Cycle Winchester about the barn line, and bits of that go through areas that are currently considered to be town forum responsibility. I mean, there's always an argument about what is and what isn't. But I just wonder if there's an opportunity there to commission some work that could then be used to go back with a bid to do some quite significant capital investment to tackle some of the issues within the town area.
Yes, I think absolutely there is, Councillor Todd. We have to have a bit of a look at the grants process for some of that, but that budget does cover vision delivery, and I would include the project you're talking about as part of that. Similarly, elsewhere, we've got the Friends of St Giles Hill, who would like to fund a strategic park plan for that area. Potentially there is access to other grant funding elsewhere if we can put a little bit of money in, and they're also willing to put some of their own funds in. So I think there are a lot of little projects like that which we could unlock. And as you say, we might want to consider being explicit about funding being available for some of those things. We have done it before, and they haven't always led to successful SIL applications. But I think you're right that sometimes we do need to spend a bit of money just so that we can access funds that are available elsewhere.
Councillor Morris.
Yes, I don't know if this is a silly question, but looking at the town account, we all know that under the local community governance review that there'll be a town council in a couple of years' time. So would this town account be a useful guide to the viability of the financial status of a future town council?
Obviously, that's prejudging the outcome of the community governance review, which I'm quite keen not to do, and I can see Councillor Becker looking at me across the room. But I think you're correct in that it outlines a lot of the areas of expenditure that would be undertaken by a new town council and gives a good guidance. But part of the work that we are doing this year is to have a deeper dive into some of those issues. So, for example, at the moment, a lot of our work is done by city council staff where we pay for their time, but they are actually employed principally by the city council, and obviously a town council will be employing its own staff and the costs may well be different, and I think it's worth also considering how many staff might be needed to run that. So we are looking at that and working through some of those figures, which is a lot of which is hidden in the detail of what lies underneath this.
Thank you. Councillor Batho.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a question in terms of 12.18. It refers there to cemeteries and the income of 150 but an expenditure of 245. I know that there was some work started last year to actually look at different ways of charging or to allow different groups to access our burial services. Has anything further been done about that, and is there a way that we can sort of try and narrow the differential between those two? Thank you.
We do need to revisit that. It is an outstanding area of work, so I think we will be chasing that up. I think that is one of those where people look at it and go, well, why don't you charge more if it costs that much? But of course, a lot of the expenditure on cemeteries is actually the looking after what are historic sites. The West Hill Cemetery is a good example, which is now managed for nature, with the gravestones in amongst a lot of really interesting wildlife. However, we are not going to be burying anybody else there, so we can't charge for it. But what we do need to do is look at whether we can have a more imaginative system, which does actually encourage a reasonable level of burials, which can help cover as much as possible of those costs. Certainly we're looking at things like potentially natural burials, which are becoming increasingly popular, and that would tie in really well with the nature improvement plan that we've agreed just this week.
Don't see any further questions unless there are any. Move on, debate. I see no debate. So thank you for the questions there. Thank you, Councillor Lerney, for taking us through the paper. Just looking at a few of the points raised there. I'm quite keen to assess the areas where we could actually perhaps take forward. Now we do have a reasonable level of reserve, but I do bear in mind the conversation we had earlier today about the potential costs of transition into town council as well. So it is a delicate balance there. The recommendation is that the Town Forum notes the financial projections in Appendix 1 and agrees the budget timetable for 2026-2027. Is that noted and agreed? Thank you. Move on to item 8, informal group updates. It is 8 o'clock, so I'd appreciate brief updates. This time I have 4 updates that I'd like to run through. First, I can't do because Miss Councillor Elizabeth Cooper has left, so we'll pick that up next time. On climate and open spaces, Councillor Eve.
Thank you, Chair. So starting off with River Park, the bridge, we're very pleased, has opened, connecting River Park, Devil's Island to the Winnell Moors. So there's access to there again. On the topic of Devil's Island, I believe still funding was approved yesterday for an accessible perimeter path. Is that right? Good. So that'll make it easier to access walking around the whole year. And the pavilion is progressing well. Residents are excited for it, and again want to thank them for their ideas and input over the years. Wider, we've got Allegra's Ambition, I believe, at the moment at the Leisure Centre, and they're making good progress as well. And as Councillor Lurney touched on, the Play Park programme continues to go along. Works have started, I believe, on the Chandler Road Play Park, and we're looking ahead to the next year and the rolling 5-year programme.
Thank you, Councillor Eve. Any questions, Councillor Eve, on that? I see none. Moving on, grants and community empowerment. Councillor Aaron, do you have a short update for us?
Delighted to hear that. Oh, thank you. That the cuts to the grants might have some relief. So that's very encouraging, because we were being faced with another £10,000 cut, which would have reduced the grants to the theatre and to Citizens Advice, as well as making community grants more difficult to access. So that would be very good news. We haven't been able to meet yet, but we are meeting on the Monday, the 29th of September. Where we will go through both sort of policy and any grant applications. But we do want to do as much as possible to increase the diversity of charities and organisations that apply for these grants. And I think one way of doing that is asking my fellow councillors to remind, particularly little organisations which aren't very well connected to the council, that there are these grants. They're not huge, but to a small little charity, that's struggling along and needs a little bit of equipment, or fits in with any of our conditions, then it's very useful money. I might be asking councillors more formally to spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you for the update. And I am also particularly pleased that we can potentially look to fully fund the grants, as was mentioned earlier. And I agree with you about the spreading the knowledge that the grants are available and getting more diversity of organisations applying for and being successful in those grants. So I'm absolutely fully supportive of anything we need to do to get that to happen. Next update for community governance review. I've got a couple of people here. So Councillor Becker, could you start us off on that, please?
Yes, absolutely. So we've spoken a bit about the community governance review tonight. The cross-party working group has now met twice and is close to agreeing the draft terms of reference and the consultation plan for that review. As I think most of you know, the terms of reference will go to licensing at its meeting at the end of the month. If they accept those draft terms of reference and the consultation plan, then we anticipate that the first stage of consultation will launch in October. That is likely to include letter drops, a really big social media campaign, and drop-in events at various locations, both within the town and those areas adjacent to the town that are also affected by the community governance review. I would appreciate views from the town forum about where you think those drop-in events should take place. There's a tendency for the council to simply say, oh, well, the Guildhall, because it's about the town, but I think we all recognise that actually within the communities that we represent, the Guildhall isn't necessarily a place that A, they are comfortable coming, or B, would happen to be near. So if you have other views about where you think drop-in events would be helpful, if you can feed those back, that would be really, really great. Thank you.
So that was the feedback from Councillor Becker with Cabinet hat on, responsible for community governance review, and also as a member of the Task and Finish group. Councillor Basso, we also have an informal group of a number of councillors around the table here to really look over my shoulder and the shoulder of the group that's doing the work. And so, Councillor Basso, you just give us an update from your perspective.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, really just tracking the progress of the Task and Finish group and the work that's being done through licensing that Councillor Becker has just briefed the forum on. In addition, the informal group is starting to look at other councils or other town councils that are in the neighbourhood to look at how they've gone through the process of that corporate governance, the community governance review. Some that are currently going through it and obviously working in parallel with the type of work that we're undertaking as a council. Others that have gone through it a number of years ago and are in a similar situation to us with a surrounding area and also the mayoralty, because we need to make sure that we don't forget that the mayoralty needs to be incorporated into this process of the transition and ensuring that we are going to the mayoralty will remain as part of the overall process of migration through the LGR process. So that's basically the progress of the informal group at the moment. Thank you.
And that is a particularly important group given the scale of the change there. So whilst the community governance review is will look at governance, then the subject of the mayoralty and the city status is not necessarily front and centre in that work. So we still need to be really clear how that's going to work and when that's going to work. And similarly for the town accounts and meetings this afternoon on this, that the transition over to a town council, should that be where it all ends up, we end up with a financially viable town council from day one. Councillor Moss, you've asked a question about the accounts earlier, which is very pertinent to that. Okay, thank you. Councillor Becker, sorry.
Thank you. No, that's all right. I just, I do have an update on the heritage group if you would like to hear it from
Delighted.
Councillor Tippett Cooper. So in addition to the Buttercross and the Hyde Abbey Gateway, there is also work going on in relation to the wall at the rear of Hyde Gate. As some of you may remember, that's the wall that collapsed a number of years ago. We are awaiting a report from some archaeologists who have worked with a community group very active in the area, Hyde 900, to examine the historic masonry from that wall. Some of you may recall that there are stones from the Abbey that were incorporated into this Victorian wall. So those carved stones have been removed and they will be examined. And this will feed into a pair of planning applications to rebuild the wall, which is not part of the scheduled ancient monument, but it is a listed structure. So there is complication there. Unfortunately, there have been some instances of graffiti on Wolsey Castle, so the team have been working to remove that carefully, given the historic nature of that. That has been reported to the police. And in addition, I'm very pleased about this one. There are some longer term repairs to the Kingsgate, which is being looked at. There are a few areas of masonry which were repaired a number of years ago in a way that modern repairers are shocked at. So they are looking at those areas of masonry and seeing how they can be repaired. And we've got some really good community involvement there. It is really touching how much the community take the heritage assets of Winchester to heart and look after them.
Thank you for that update. Moving on, item 9, work programme for 2025-26, which is in your packs. If I look at the work programme, the next meeting is on the 10th of November. We've got 2 items currently on there for the Town Forum Grant Programme update and for the town account draft budget options. I'll be working with Mr. Hendy to flesh out anything else that needs to go into the forward plan beyond what is shown on the list here. But on the basis of what's in the document today, we need to note the current version of the work programme plan as it currently stands. Is that noted? Thank you very much. And I think that concludes the business. Thank you all very much for your time.